Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you.
There we go. I knew I'd get one of them eventually. Alright, there I am. It's the correct one. I saw a bunch of other people there. James Collins in YouTube chat. You better not do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. James Collins about to say candy ass 5 times, and if you say that 5 times, Brian Stelter will appear in the bathroom mirror. Don't say it again. I will ban you from chat. There's nothing to mess around with. Please go see Ladder with Crowder if you would like to know more about the dangers of saying candy ass 5 times in a mirror. Alrighty. Well, today we have a very special midweek show for you. We haven't done a midweek show in like a year, probably since the first time Kyle Rittenhouse was relevant in the news. And for that, I apologize. But today I bring to you, I'm roboting. I bet you're probably roboting. What do you mean I'm roboting? Sound mic. Timberwolf, are you? What's the problem here? Let me know in chat what the problem with the mic is. I can reset it, I guess. Let me see here. Give me a second. Let's see here. Is that any better? Let's see here. We'll find out, I guess. Alrighty. Let me know in chat if you're upset about my mic quality. Alright, so we are going to be talking about the Kyle Rittenhouse case today, which had jury selection yesterday, and they had opening statements and a little bit of testimony today. Thank you very much for telling me it's better, Timberwolf. Alright, so I've got some notes here. So basically what I've done is be like a very informal show here, and I'm going to try and do this a few times this week to keep you guys all up to date with the Kyle Rittenhouse case. If you are not aware, Kyle Rittenhouse, who I'll explain who that is in a second if you don't know already. Kyle Rittenhouse, his trial is this week. It's expected to take about 2 weeks. It could take a little longer, it could take a little less, depending on how the testimony goes. There was some pretrial stuff last week, which we'll talk about. Like I said, jury selection yesterday, and today was the first official day of the trial with opening statements and a little bit of testimony. So Kyle Rittenhouse, for those of you guys who don't know, I don't know how you couldn't. Kyle Rittenhouse is famous or infamous for having been in Kenosha, Wisconsin last August, well, I guess 2 Augusts ago, after a serial rapist named, what was his name? Blake. It was something Blake. Gosh. See how unprepared I am, guys? Man, I'm just doing awful. All right. So a guy named Blake got shot by the police after he was raping somebody over and over again. Jacob Blake, that's who it is. Jacob Blake was killed, or was shot by the police, was paralyzed by the police after he pulled a knife on a cop who was trying to arrest him for having kidnapped and raped a girl that he used to know, kidnapped her children and then raped her. And for the crime of the police shooting a armed rapist who's currently kidnapping a child, shooting him and paralyzing him, for that crime, Black Lives Matter and Antifa decided to riot and burn down Kenosha, Wisconsin, for some reason. And during that riot, over the course of several nights, Kyle Rittenhouse, along with many other residents of the Kenosha region, they decided they did not want to have their businesses burned down and their possible lives taken from them, and so they decided to step up and do what the police and the National Guard refused to do and defend their town. During that defense, Kyle Rittenhouse, in self-defense, shot a pedophile, a wife beater, and another wife beater Shock. Two of them died. One of them was, he was disarmed. And there was a few other people that he shot at but missed. And all of that landed Kyle with some serious charges. So Kyle right now has 6 charges against him, levied against him by the state of Wisconsin. Those include various charges around the inappropriate shooting and murder of several people, which we'll go through as I read through the case today. And so right now Kyle's facing 6 charges. 3 of them are like murder. Other ones are pretty close to murder. And one of them is a charge about a gun being taken across state lines, and that one's a little shaky. I would, and maybe I'll do this later in the week, give a more thorough breakdown of the case as kind of like what happened originally. But really what I'm trying to do with this tonight, and if I do these shows again throughout the week, which I'm hoping to do, is really just go through the case with an assumption that you guys kind of know the background on this. The background I just gave was pretty loosey-goosey, very, very improv. I'm sure I left out a lot of important context. All of that context has been gone through ad nauseum on this show and other shows over the last year. So like I said, if you don't have the background information on this, this probably isn't the show to watch. There's some other shows that you can watch or other breakdown videos that you can to get that background knowledge. Really what I'm trying to do here is go through the actual case results, like what's going on in the trial, rather than the background on the case itself. So first thing is first, we had day 1 jury selection, which actually was not exactly the first day. So we had last week, which you may have heard, there was some interesting sound bites out of last week, where they had the pretrial phase, where you just had basically the lawyers from both sides against the state of Wisconsin prosecuting Kyle Rittenhouse for 6 charges. And the pretrial phase is just kind of the lawyers negotiating, what are they going to bring up in for evidence and testimony, and what's kind of the rules of the road, talking to the judge about different things. So during that last week, there was an interesting soundbite in which the judge, who is a rather spry and somewhat funny old man, seems to be rather fair so far. We'll get into that in a little bit here. But last week, the state prosecutors wanted to refer to Rosenbaum, who is one of the people Kyle cured of pedophilia, and what was his name? Andrew Hubert, I believe. Yes, Anthony Hubert is the skateboarder who used to serially beat his girlfriend. He no longer serially beats her, though, because Kyle also cured him of that. The state, and then the Gage something. I know I've got his name somewhere. His last name's like nearly unpronounceable, but he is the guy that Kyle disarmed. Literally. The state would like to refer to those people as Kyle's victims. And the judge last week during pretrial phase actually said, no, you cannot call them victims because at the time of their demise, they were rioting, looting, and committing arson. And you can refer to them as rioters, looters, and arsonists, but you may not refer to them as victims because the state has not proved that they were victims yet. Perhaps after the trial has concluded, should the state be victorious, perhaps then they could be labeled as victims in the eyes of the state. But as of right now, the entire case is about whether or not those people were victims or assailants. Like, that's actually material to the case. So for the state to try to refer to them as victims prematurely is actually highly wrong. So the judge was acting very fairly in that, and that actually was a pretty big loss for the state to not be able to characterize those awful people as victims, those people who tried to attack and kill Kyle. Trying to classify them as victims was wrong, and the judge said no, you can't call them that. So let's see here. So then we moved into yesterday. So yesterday was kind of the day 0, so to speak. It's called voidere, which is a Latin word, I believe, or Latin phrase, which is for jury selection. So jury selection, It took place yesterday. It was a good 7.5 hours. I watched all of it at 2X. Very fun. So they had... Yes, they were perpetrators. They had 40 people, about 40 jurors to start off with. Their goal throughout the 7.5 hours yesterday was to pare that down to 20. Now, ultimately, only 12 jurors will be deciding the case, but the way Wisconsin does their jury trials is rather than having a 12-person jury plus alternates, what they do is they have a 20-person jury pool, and after all the trial stuff's done and the jury goes to vote, they actually save the selection of the 12 members until after. So as of right now, all 20 members of the jury pool, they're all equally likely to be the juror or to not be the juror. They're equally likely to be somebody voting on what they think on what the verdict is, or to be kicked out as not a member of the official jury pool. And what that allows Wisconsin to do is, instead of having 12 people that they've pre-selected, and then all of a sudden somebody's got a family emergency or whatever, and they've got to leave, and then they got to swap in an alternate, maybe they run out of alternates and all that jazz. They just have everybody as equally likely to be or not be part of the verdict pool. So if, for instance, throughout the course of the trial, some of them need to leave, it's not as big of a deal, because even if like 4 or 5 of them leave, it doesn't matter, because they didn't have any more responsibility than any of the other ones to actually be there till the end. So this makes it a little bit easier for them to select it at the end. So if you hear some differences and you're not from Wisconsin, I'm not from Wisconsin, so I didn't know that's how they do that. That's why they've got 20 jurors right now. So yesterday they pared it from 40 down to 20. Let's see here. And then after the trial's complete, or after the trial phase of the trial is complete, they will pare that back down to 12, and those 12 will vote on the verdict. All right, so the jury pool was interesting. We had it's a little odd about the profession. So you had the first 3 people that they went through. 2 of them were teachers, which seemed a little like statistically odd. And also, I think that teachers probably wouldn't be very favorable, probably teachers' unions, probably not very favorable to Kyle here. The judge did start off with a round of Jeopardy, which was a little interesting. There was some just technical details that needed to be worked out in the courtroom, and so to waste some time, the judge decided to play Jeopardy with the jury pool, which was interesting. And I don't know, he might have hit on some interesting things there. So, but the judge seems to be, even though he's 75, he seems to be rather decently quick-witted. He doesn't seem dull or unintelligent or, slow or anything like that. He seems to be a rather spry 75-year-old. Like I said last week, he picked up right away that the state wanted to presuppose Rosenbaum and Anthony and Gage as victims, when the entire case is about whether or not they're victims. That's the question, is were those victims or were they assailants that Kyle stopped? And so he picked up on that. So he seems to be rather fair. There's some other interesting back and forth that I'll be going through tonight, and there'll be one clip. We're not going to watch a lot of clips from it. I do have one clip I want to play tonight. But basically, as I was watching through yesterday and today, I just had, every time I heard something interesting, I wrote it down, and that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm just going through that list of all these interesting things I heard to give you guys kind of the highlights. It's not going to be a play-by-play. I mean, if you guys want the play-by-play, you can watch the whole thing yourselves, but this is kind of the more detailed highlights here. So let's see here. So the judge asked the jury, the possible jury candidates yesterday during jury selection, asked them questions about bias, asked them if they knew anybody in the case. They listed off like 200 names of all the people that could possibly be involved in the case during testimony, and witnesses, and investigators, and people who worked at the court, and all that sort of stuff. And they just listed off tons and tons of names, asked, does anybody know these people? Do you have any family relationships or friendship relationships like that? That's all pretty boilerplate. One juror was interesting. They had actually, their dad's funeral was supposed to be in Kenosha on the night of the riots, and had a very sad story about how that was postponed because of the riots. And so that was a little it was a little heart-wrenching. It was actually interesting because that was one of all of the jurors who had some kind of, emotional connection to that night. When you are part of a mob that burns down an entire city, don't be surprised when the jury of your peers, all of them either were or knew somebody who was affected traumatically by that night. So I think that they ended up releasing I don't know that for sure, but I think they ended up releasing the one whose dad had the funeral postponed because of the riots. But I really think that that's the perfect person to be on the jury. You're supposed to have a jury of your peers. If you burn down the entire town of the jury of your peers, that's your fucking problem. Also, there's going to be a lot of cursing tonight. That's just the start, because I'm really pissed about some of the stuff that I heard from the today part. And I'm only talking about what happened yesterday during jury selection right now. All right, so the judge asked the jury pool a lot of boilerplate questions. If you ever watched jury selection before, it's kind of boring, but it's very standard questions about like, are you biased? Do you think you could judge the case fairly? Do you know people? Stuff like that. Then the state prosecutors and the defense got to talk to the jury and ask them questions. Both sides have the ability to, without any reason at all, they can dismiss up to 7 jurors. So if they see somebody and they're just like, you know what, I don't like the cut of their jib, they're out. It doesn't matter what the reason is. They can just pull this card and they don't have to say why. They actually didn't use any of those. There was a few people where the state prosecutor or the defense attorney asked a question. They didn't really like the answer to it, or it seemed like it was clear-cut bias. And so the judge would just say, do you guys agree to dismiss? And they would both agree, and they would just dismiss the juror. So there was a lot of that. There really wasn't any, we're just dismissing this person just because. Again, that's something that you can do. It's not necessarily something that always happens. It's usually reserved for pretty special cases. Let's see here. The state prosecutors had an interesting discussion with the jurors. One of the jurors said that they had to help board up windows on the night of Kyle's incident because Kyle was actually out on the second night of Kenosha riots because it happened several nights in a row. And so that second night, people knew, okay, we got to board up our windows. So one of the jurors had actually been one of the people boarding up the windows. Several of the jurors, like almost half, had said something to the effect that they had left town the second night, or they knew someone who had left town the second night, or they had wanted to leave town the second night, but they weren't actually able to gather the resources to leave town the second night. And why did they want to leave town the second night? Because they were scared for their lives about what happened on the first night. Again, if you burn down the entire town of your peers, don't be surprised when a jury of your peers involves people who you directly impacted. Now, Rosenbaum is not here to be, to face those consequences because Kyle cured him of his pedophilia, which, if you don't know, Rosenbaum was a pretty bad, not just a regular pedophile, like a pretty bad one. He was in jail for 12 years after raping like a couple, like 5 or 6 as young as 5-year-olds, like brutally anally raping them. Apparently that only gets you 12 years. I would have thought that you'd at least, like, I don't know, maybe like 12 per, but either way, Rosenbaum, not a good dude. He's kind of like Corn Pop. Let's see here. So one of the jurors said that as a result of the riots, they had actually adjusted their housing decorations. They had some Blue Lives Matter paraphernalia out, and they've actually removed that sense because of their fear of what happened during the riots. At least three, I think maybe more, but I definitely remember 3 female jurors testified during jury selection that they had become gun owners in the last year as a direct result of the riots. The riots scared them so much in the last year, having never owned a gun before, they became new gun owners. 3 females of the jury had become recent gun owners because of these incidents. Again, that's pretty big. That's a pretty big deal there, especially because a key part of this process or this trial is whether or not it was okay for Kyle to have a gun. Now I'll get into that in a little bit here because that's going to be definitely a part of the opening statements here. But it should be noted again, that's pretty powerful stuff that you've got 3 females and that they are definitely a representative sample of peers right now, because there is millions, tens of millions of Americans, especially in the last 18 months. Tens of millions of Americans in the last 18 months have become new gun owners, largely females making up those new gun ownerships. And why are they new gun owners? Because people like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, people like the ones Kyle cured last year, they are the reason why Americans are so terrified. Why? What do you think that they're going to do with those guns? So those three women on the jury, what do you think that they got those guns for? So they could not use them? What do you think they're going to think of Kyle when they see Kyle? Oh, he's getting chased by the people they're terrified of, and he was no choice but to use his gun. What do you think those girls are going to think? They're probably going to think, yeah, I probably would have had to do the same thing. All right, so let's see here. The prosecutor asked if anyone disagrees. Okay, this was a big one, and this one's going to come back up here in a second. The state prosecutor asked, does anyone disagree with the statement, human life is more valuable than property? To which my correct answer is no. Human life is not necessarily more valuable than property. If you're going to ask it that flippantly, I'm going to just say no outright. If you're going to be asking it more casually, I'll say, okay, there's some caveats to it. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But if you don't think that property is more valuable than your life, then don't take my property, and I won't take your life. All right, so there was this one was kind of funny. There was multiple jurors, all female. At least 4 women from the jury pool were dismissed after they admitted that they literally could not contain themselves under threat of law from gossiping about the case. One of the girls actually said, "Oh, I'm a big gossip with my sister. I tell her everything." And the judge goes, "Well, I mean, we just said that you're not allowed to talk about the case until it's over, or you're not allowed to talk about the trial until it's over. Like, do you think that you could contain yourself for 2 weeks and not talk to your sister?" And she testified no. She's like, "I literally can't contain myself." And so the judge called her bluff and says, "Well, we're not necessarily doing sequestration right now, but we could do sequestration for a single person. So would you be, why don't we do that with you? If you literally can't contain yourself, then we'll just sequester you. You can't use your phone or have internet, and we'll keep you in a hotel for 2.5 weeks." And she's like, well. And the judge goes, "Yeah, are you sure? Like, are you sure that's what you want to do? Like, or do you think that maybe you could contain yourself and not talk to your sister for 2 weeks about the case? You can talk to her about other stuff, just not about the case." And then she goes, "Oh, okay, well, maybe I could do that." But she thought that she was going to get out of jury duty, and the judge says, "No, we'll just lock you in a hotel." I thought it was a little bit pathetic, though, that it was the females who just continuously were like, "Oh, I'm just such a gossip. I can't contain myself. I'll probably tell people." Freaking like a jury of your Karens, basically. That was kind of a setback for feminism, I think. Let's see here. It was also reiterated during jury selection, made clear to the jury pool, the ones that remained, that the way that this case works is, so Kyle he admitted already that he did kill these people. That's not in question. What is in question and what he's not guilty of is, was this self-defense? Because if this was self-defense, then it's okay. He did not break any laws if this was self-defense. And I'm going to get more into this, but there's something called self-defense privilege. There's a privilege of self-defense, in which the self-defense overrides other laws. So he's got that privilege, and so the state must make the case. And so right now, Kyle is innocent, right? He's innocent until proven guilty. So as of right now, Kyle is assumed to have the privilege of self-defense. The state, in order to prosecute Kyle, has to make the case that Kyle did not act in self-defense. They have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. There is beyond a reasonable doubt that Kyle was not acting in self-defense. That's going to be a tough case to prosecute. We'll see how they do. So that was day one. That was really day 0. That was day 0 jury selection. That was yesterday on Monday. That was that on the 1st? Yeah, that was November 1st, Monday. So November 1st, Monday, that was day 0, jury selection, which brings us to day 1, which was today, Tuesday, on the 2nd of November. Today we had opening statements. Opening statements from the state prosecution, followed by opening statements from Kyle's defense. So before opening statements, there was a little bit of just kind of back and forth with the lawyers and the judge, kind of about just various discussions about the mechanics of the trial, what they're allowed to say, some last minute decisions as to, what kind of evidence was going to be presented, how were certain instructions about certain laws going to be given to the jury. So the way the way a court trial works is that there's laws. Obviously, there's laws. The judge will explain to the jury, this is how you're supposed to interpret this law, and these are the kind of rules for how to determine if something's running afoul of this law, and that's called jury instruction. So there was a lot of questions about, well, there's a lot of nuance in these self-defense laws. How exactly is the judge going to be instructing the jury? And so there were some discussions about that. One of the things, which I'm going to come back to, that was discussed during this pre-opening statements phase today was Richie Mcginnis. So if you guys don't remember our coverage on this way back when it originally happened last year, I gave a very angry rant several times last year about Richie Mcginnis. And to kind of recap who is Richie Mcginnis? Maybe you've heard the name, but you just don't know who I'm talking about. So Richie Mcginnis is a supposed alleged journalist who found himself at a lot of the riots last year. I can't even remember who he works for. I want to say Daily Caller, but I'm not positive. All I know for sure is that I don't think he's really a journalist. I think he's just an agitator, but that's not a very popular opinion. So Richie Mcginnis is one of the people that represents one of the 6 charges against Kyle Rittenhouse. So Kyle Rittenhouse has a charge for murdering Rosenbaum, a charge for murdering Hubert, or whatever. I think it's Anthony Huber. And then a charge for shooting and wounding the Gage guy, who's the Glock guy. He's got 2 charges of endangering people's lives by reckless action. And one of those reckless actions is that he shot in the general vicinity of Richie Mcginnis, who is this supposed journalist again. And then the 6th charge is to do with him having, with Kyle having a rifle, illegally possessing it in some manner due to his age and his location, et cetera, et cetera. That one's a little bit less important. That one's probably not going to be the thing that hangs him. So the question around Richie Mcginnis is, Kyle wasn't shooting at Richie Mcginnis. He was shooting at Rosenbaum. Richie Mcginnis just happened to be a little bit downrange of where this person was. So my upsetness at Richie Mcginnis being one of the charges is that Richie Mcginnis is supposed to be in the media. The media inserted itself so deeply into this story during the riots, they actually became a charge against Kyle. And that shouldn't happen. That frustrated me to no end, that Richie Mcginnis was supposed to be supposedly covering the riots, supposed to be showing you the things the mainstream media didn't want to show you. The mainstream media was trying to whitewash the riots all year, saying, oh, these are mostly peaceful protests, et cetera, et cetera. And there was a handful of people going out into the crowds with cameras, live streaming. Here's what's really happening. Richie Mcginnis was supposed to be supposedly one of these people showing you the truth, right? So he's supposed to be showing you the truth. And instead, he inserted himself in this position so incorrectly that he's now a charge against Kyle. So Kyle is defending his community, defending his life against the rioters that supposedly Richie Mcginnis is trying to expose, right? So Richie Mcginnis is supposedly trying to expose the horrors of the rioters that the mainstream media doesn't want to tell you. And in the process of exposing how terrible the rioters are, he's actually got Kyle Rittenhouse wrapped up in a gun charge. That is incorrect way to, you're doing the media wrong. If you've become the story, you're doing the media wrong. Now, why else am I upset at Richie Mcginnis? Because my allegation against Richie is that he was not a member of the media that night. Now, is he a member of the media? Yes. Has he produced content at one point? Yes. Has he written an article or two? I don't know about that, actually. I don't know if he's ever produced any articles. My contention is that Richie Mcginnis, at the moment that he was supposedly getting shot at by Kyle, the way, and we'll probably go through some videos later on down the road, but if you guys are remembering the videos, the first shooting that Kyle had was with Rosenbaum. Rosenbaum chased Kyle through a parking lot. Kyle turned and shot him as he was being pursued. Richie Mcginnis was running alongside Rosenbaum after Kyle. So Richie Mcginnis in that moment was running alongside a pedophile chasing a child. Richie Mcginnis was clad in all black. Richie Mcginnis was claiming to be a member of the media, but he had no camera on him, he had no voice recorder on him, and he had no notepad on him. And we know that because he has talked about his night famously on Timcast. That was probably, Timcast IRL is probably his longest form interview that he's had about that night. But he's definitely talked about it other places. So my anger at Richie Mcginnis is that he was LARPing as a live streamer that night. He didn't actually have any equipment on him to actually do any kind of media gathering. He wasn't actually producing or capturing any content. What he was doing was he was clad in black, so he looked like he was a rioter, and he was running alongside a pedophile rapist chasing a child. I mean, right, yeah, and maybe child's a little aggressive for 17-year-old, but I'm trying to color a picture here. And so when Kyle turned around to shoot at Rosenbaum, he wasn't shooting at Richie Mcginnis. But why was Richie even there in the first place? Why was he so close to the situation that he was literally in the line of fire of a situation that was happening? That's just irresponsible. And maybe you guys are like, oh, yeah, Fox, you're being a little hard on him. It's just really flippant to say that's irresponsible. So Richie Mcginnis has kind of a history of involving himself in situations like this at the riots. So a couple of weeks after the Kenosha riots, there were some other riots that Richie Mcginnis was at, and he actually got arrested. Because why was Richie Mcginnis arrested? Well, because he was in the center of a mob that was attacking the police. He was, again, clad in all black. The police they put a kind of a cattle thing around all of the mob. Richie got caught up in it and he got arrested, and he was angry. He was angry at the police and was trying to sue the police that they were arresting a member of the media, even though when they arrested him, once again, he was clad in all black, didn't have a camera on him, didn't have a voice recorder on him, didn't have a notepad on him, claiming to be a part of the media. So I don't know what the hell Richie's deal is. I really don't. And I know for a fact it's not a popular opinion to, like, very conspiratorial, like, oh, Richie's like some kind of instigator. I don't know if it's that deep. I don't think there's any conspiracy theory about him being like an FBI, instigator or anything like that. I just think Richie's extremely incompetent at everything he does, and his incompetence has now put Kyle's legal future in jeopardy. Now, why am I so hung up on this one issue? Well, the Richie Mcginnis issue is the thing. My prediction right now, having only seen the first day of this, my prediction right now is that Kyle will be cleared of all charges except for, and this will change throughout the week, I'm sure. Right now, my initial prediction is that Kyle will be cleared of all charges except for recklessly endangering Richie Mcginnis's life. The reason why is the judge and the lawyers today got very, very hung up on this charge about Richie Mcginnis. So there is a statute that goes along with the privilege of self-defense. So as I said before, there's a privilege of self-defense where it overrides other laws. And in that statute of self-defense, let me see here. So let me read through here let me see if I can read through my notes here, because I know there's like a specific wording, and I don't want to get it wrong by doing it off the top of my head. There we go. Okay, so there is, along with the statute in Wisconsin law, there's a statement that cites specifically, quote, if the defendant was acting in self-defense, then his actions did not constitute an unreasonable risk to anyone else. So what that basically says is that so long as you are acting within the boundary of the privilege of self-defense, you cannot possibly be responsible for recklessly endangering someone's life because you were engaging in self-defense. So therefore you were not acting recklessly. If anyone's, now this isn't part of the law, but from my interpretation of that is that the spirit of the law is that it's not the person acting in self-defense that's recklessly endangering someone downrange. It's the person causing the need for a self-defense action that's actually endangering. So really, it's not Rittenhouse acting in self-defense that was recklessly endangering Richie Mcginnis' life. It was Rosenbaum's action of attacking Kyle. Rosenbaum is the one who recklessly endangered Richie's life. Now, that's not specified in the law, but I think that's kind of the intention, the spirit of it, by saying, well, the self-defendant is not the one responsible for recklessly endangering the life. So the reason why this got hung up is because, as many laws do, unfortunately, and man, this one's a doozy. Self-defense that's a real doozy to have a broken law around self-defense. There are lots of laws that contradict each other, right? And so the judge has to figure out which one supersedes what, or do we leave it up to the jury to decide which one's superseding, right? So this is a case where the self-defense law seems to be pretty clear cut. Again, like I said, if it's acting in self-defense, then the action did not constitute unreasonable risk to anyone else. But also there's another law that says, well, you can't just use self-defense as like a infinite get out of jail free card to like recklessly endanger people's lives. So there's kind of a contradiction there, and the judge admitted that there was a contradiction there, and basically the decision was, well, we'll let the jury decide. And why don't you guys let me grab a drink of water here. All right. So basically because of that, I think the jury is going to look at this situation and Jesus Christ, Richie Mcginnis is supposed to fucking testify, which is going to be nuts. That I think is going to hang up the jury. And I think that Kyle will end up going to jail for recklessly endangering an incompetent YouTuber's life, which will be highly, highly sad. Let's see here. So it's really BS. Richie should not have been there in the location that he was. Now, that's not to say that he can't be there, quote unquote, acting like a journalist. Maybe he should try and grab a camera phone at some point, or at least a notepad. And I want to kind of reiterate that it's not just me hating on Richie Mcginnis. It's that he's pretending to be doing things that he's clearly not. So there's another on the ground journalist named Elijah Schaefer, who's also a part of this case and will also be testifying. Elijah Schaefer was at Kenosha and also at the other event where Richie got arrested. Elijah Schaefer was on the sidelines, taking video from the sidelines. That's where a journalist belongs, not on the field in the thick of it. And somehow Elijah Schaefer didn't get arrested in either of these places. He didn't get shot at in either of these places. Well, he didn't get shot at by Kyle, at least. And he's not involved in a case where he's saying somebody recklessly endangered his life. And he also had a cell phone and was taking video. He had a voice recorder. He has a show that he produced. There's real content that he's making, and he's not involving himself in these situations where he's disobeying direct orders from cops or saying that vigilante defenders are trying to kill him. Somehow Richie, no camera, no voice recorder, somehow finds himself, again, clad in all black, somehow finds himself in all these weird situations where, oh my gosh, they're just harassing journalists. So that's why I'm so upset, because there's definitely an alternative, and Elijah Schaefer represents a pretty clear-cut alternative to what Richie was doing. And so when I'm saying Richie shouldn't have been there, I mean, it's fine that he was in Kenosha. It's fine that he's pretending to be a journalist, I guess. he should not have been running next to Rosenbaum chasing Kyle. That's where he shouldn't have been, because it kind of looks like you're just a part of the mob at that point. Let's see here. So the defense made a mistake in they should have classified Richie as a rioter. So everybody keeps referring to in the case included the defense. So Kyle Rittenhouse's defense attorneys and the state prosecutors are both referring to Richie Mcginnis as a journalist. Like I said, he didn't have a camera on him. He didn't have a voice recorder on him. He didn't have a notepad on him. He was dressed in all black. He was running alongside a rioter chasing Rittenhouse. The defense made a mistake here, and they should have classified Richie Mcginnis as a rioter. That is my opinion here. Again, Richie was clad in all black, no journalism tools whatsoever, running alongside a pedophile, chasing a kid, and Kyle shot at Rosenbaum, not at Richie, and all of a sudden, oh no, I got shot at. I'm a journalist. It's like, okay, yeah, but you weren't. I am quote unquote a journalist or a commentator at least, but that doesn't give me the permission to like chase people, right? So you can be a thing, you can have a profession. Just because you have a profession doesn't mean you're always that thing in that moment. So yes, perhaps Richie Mcginnis in some contexts is professionally a journalist. In the moment where he's chasing somebody, no, you're not a journalist. You're not a journalist when you're chasing somebody. It's a threat, especially when you're chasing somebody alongside somebody else who intends to do them harm. At that point, you are contributing to a riotous environment, which is in fact against the law. That's actually a legal distinction, that there is this legal theory where you are not a mob and a riot is a collective act, right? So to prosecute somebody who's in a mob, you wouldn't call them, oh, like you're a mobster or like well, I guess you could call them a rioter, but you would prosecute them as having contributed to a riotous atmosphere. And that's what Richie does. Richie goes to places and contributes to riotous atmospheres by dressing in all black, being a part of the crowd, and not actually doing any journalism. And that's how the prosecution, or that's how the defense, Kyle's defense, should have labeled Richie as such, instead of pretending with this fiction that he was being a journalist in that moment. Because again, this is important. I think the Richie Mcginnis thing is going to be the thing that hangs up Kyle, because of that problem of was it okay for Kyle to shoot at Rosenbaum even though Richie was a little bit downrange? If it was self-defense, it is. If it was self-defense, but the jury decides to have the alternate interpretation, then Kyle still gets hung on that. So that's the problem. If Richie wasn't there, then there wouldn't be this sticky situation in the case. And I was surprised that this was the thing that was sticky. They talked about this for probably 40 minutes, going back and forth on the legal definitions and looking at one law and looking at another law. And at one point, the judge, he got an argument from the defense that was very compelling, and the judge just stopped, read through his screen, read through his paper for about 10 to 15 minutes. The judge it was just completely quiet in the courtroom, and the judge just sat there and read very intently through the different paradoxes in that law. And at the end of that time that he spent doing that, he basically said it's up to the jury. It's going to have to be up to the jury to figure out which way they want to interpret this. And that is Richie Mcginnis's fault. That is absolutely his fault. And it's absurdly wrong that he did that to Kyle. That's his fault. There's going to be some more on Richie. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. It's going to be the Richie Mcginnis trial by the end of it. All right, so let's see here. There was a statue. Yeah, I went through that part. The judge also said that that Richie Mcginnis wasn't acting with malice or aggression towards Kyle, which again, I think that if you're running after somebody, if you're in a dark situation and there's somebody who's being chased, yes, thank you, Slowpoke. If it's dark and somebody's being chased by someone who intends to do them harm, and you also start running alongside that person who intends malice, you start running alongside them, chasing after somebody, whether you intended it or not, you are threatening that person. So to say that McGinnis wasn't acting with aggression towards Kyle, for the judge to say that was a little, I didn't like that. That was a little bit presumptive. And I think that is something that should have been left to it's something that was obviously true, that there was malice or that there was aggression in that moment. Maybe not malice, but there was certainly aggression, intentional or not. And I think that the judge should not have made a declarative statement on that. That was a mistake. Alrighty. So one of the state prosecutors looks like a pedophile. He just has that look to him. Is that really pertinent information to the case? No, but it's fun trivia. We have a really weird system of justice here. So I noticed this during the case. So maybe some of you have watched court TV or like watched a TV show where there's court cases, or maybe some of you have even watched, like I did, just full length court, just raw footage. There's this weird thing that happens where the judges and the lawyers will kind of have jokey, jovial, laughy moments with each other. There was a few times where the state would say one thing and the defense would say, oh no, we interpret it like this. And the judge would say, well, they kind of interpreted it like this. Ha 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 ha. And it was kind of this like esoteric legal humor, I would guess. And so there were several moments throughout the jury or throughout the trial so far where there was kind of this like laughy moment where there was chuckles between the defense and the prosecution attorneys. There was chuckles from the judge, and there was chuckles between them, and it's just it kind of looked like they're all having just like a blast together. And I'm sure that they were. I mean, they're all getting paid probably hundreds of thousands. Certainly the lawyers are. The judge probably, he's a 50-year judge. He's been a judge for 50 years. He's probably raking in some dough. So they're all getting paid a couple $100,000 a year, and they're just having a blast, all having the time of their lives, laughing, joking, all this stuff. Now, again, that's not to say that there weren't serious moments, but just sometimes there's these moments of levity, and you're watching them laugh with each other about a legal joke that you probably have to pay $300,000 at Harvard to actually understand what the joke was about and get yourself a law degree. And I just think it's absolutely fucking disrespectful. It's ridiculous. It's such a weird thing. And I mean, you've got a guy like Kyle's life. He's 18 years old now. He was 17 years old at the time. He's looking at a lot of years in jail for some of these charges. I mean, some of these charges have him, especially collectively, have him in jail for the rest of his like natural life. I mean, like we're talking 60 to 70 more years of life that he'll be in jail for if he gets collective charges. And it's just weird that we have this system where, you've got these middle class people, lower class people judged. Their trial is overseen by a 1%er judge, and their case is being managed by 1%er lawyers, and they're all just laughing about these esoteric jokes that only lawyers get, and it's ha 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 ha. And like meanwhile, just like the middle class rubes, like your whole your life is at stake. And I don't know. It's kind of a trope, right? Like, oh, like the American legal system, like the founding fathers gave us this system of justice, and it's a trial of your peers, and it's the best system of justice we've ever had, and all. And it's, I mean, come on, you can't think of something better than that. I don't know. It's a little weird, and I don't like it, and I really hope I don't have to go through the legal system like that, because it's just weird. It's just fucking weird, and it's disrespectful, and it just doesn't convey the gravity of what's going on. Especially in this case, right? I feel rather invested in this. I wouldn't say personally invested, but like invested emotionally. We covered this right away. I had actually been watching the live streams the night that this happened, and we covered this thoroughly on the show. Feel like I've got a lot of knowledge of the case, and I think that this is definitely a case that for better or worse, is representative of the politics right now. Do Americans fundamentally have the right to defend themselves against Marxist insurrectionists? And I think yes. The state of Wisconsin thinks no. And I think that we need to have that decided once and for all. And unfortunately for Kyle, he represents that. But in the meantime, you just have this kind of like theatrical play of esquires yucking it up and laughing about esoteric things, and it's just so funny, and it's all so fucking funny, don't you guys think? And it's really not. It's really not. But that's just how our legal system works, is you just have us poor rubes are represented by the 1%, and we're judged by the 1%, and they just laugh while they take all your paycheck. Let's see here. So then we had the opening statements we're finally at the opening statements. That was today. Again, they went through about an hour and a half or so of just discussions with the lawyer about like various specific things that they were going to tell the jury. And then they finally got to where they brought the jury in and they had opening statements by the prosecutor. Let's see here. So opening statements by the prosecutor, just kind of going down the list here. So, obviously it was framed. I think I'm probably just telling you what you already know, and that they misrepresented a lot of what happened that night. The prosecutors obviously did. They made it kind of sound like Kyle was out there hunting all these good old boys, just out there having a wee little protest about this, unfortunate killing this unfortunate shooting of a rapist, and that Kyle was just out there hunting them down. He hunted one down, and then he went found another one and hunted him down. He was stalking his prey and just executing them whenever he could find them. And the prosecution even went so far as to frame all of the people that Kyle shot at as citizens of Kenosha, which I did not have time to fact check this. I will try to bring this up for you next time we talk about this, which will hopefully be tomorrow. I think at least one of the people was not actually a citizen of Kenosha, and I think that it's well known that many of the rioters were not actually from Kenosha. So for the prosecution, especially for the state of Wisconsin, to frame this as, oh, they're just, good citizens, everyday men of the city of Kenosha, I don't know if that quite holds up. Certainly it's not true in a moral sense. It might be true in a technical sense for some of them. But I'm thinking it's actually not true in a technical sense for some of them. But I will come back to you with some of that. Yes, Richie was not a citizen. That is a good point. Thank you, Triumvirate. Triumvirate found the one. So, okay. So I will look up the other ones, but yes, that's absolutely true. Thank you, Triumvirate on DLive. Richie Mcginnis was not a citizen of Kenosha. So to say that Kyle was out there hunting down citizens of Kenosha, well, to the extent that he was hunting down Richie Mcginnis, or Richie Mcginnis, inserted himself into Kyle's sights, well, Richie wasn't a citizen of Kenosha, so, fuck him. Let's see here. So again, like I said, this was very expected. This isn't like, oh my gosh, can you believe that they framed it, with Kyle being the bad guy? Yeah, of course they did. Let's see here. So the state prosecution linked this to the context of the riots at large, which I think did not have their intended consequence. I will say the state prosecutor, there's two of them. One of them looks like a pedophile. We haven't heard him speak very much. The other guy, very clean cut, good looking, well spoken, very nice flow to his presentation. It was all lies, but it was very nice flow. He had very good presentation. Now, that's in contrary to the defense, and this is a little bit unfortunate. Not that the defense was a train wreck by any means. They did a very good presentation. It's just it didn't have as good a flow. He wasn't as good as a rhetorician as the rhetorical speaker as the other guy, which... Is that the end of the world? No, but it doesn't help. It's helpful to hear the state the state prosecutor, very soothing voice, very well spoken, good cadence to his words. I'm somebody, who speaks for a not living, right? So I'm aware when I'm speaking well and when I've got good flow. And I know when I'm sure you guys have heard shows where like, oh, Fox is a little rough tonight. Yeah, and I know that too. I'm well aware of that. And so you can tell when somebody's just, there's a little bit roughness on the edge. It's not that it's a train wreck, not that there's any problem with it, not that he didn't convey the information. It's just when you're a juror and you're sitting there listening to these people, you're really getting a feeling. What you're going to remember is how you felt. So when we get to 2 weeks from now, get to 3 weeks from now, and the jury is going to make a decision, they're not really going to remember the opening statements. They're going to remember that, oh, I felt calmed and soothed when the state prosecutor was talking, and I felt a little rough, felt a little bit perturbed. It wasn't as much of an easy listening experience when the defense was talking. That's not the end of the world. It's not the best thing that could have happened, though. So that's a little unfortunate. Hopefully we'll see some better stuff during the trial here. I certainly don't think that's going to be the make or break for Kyle, but, every little bit helps. Let's see here. So the state prosecutors linked it to the context of the riots. They again, and I said I'd bring this back up, they again, in their opening statement, said life is more important than property. Why is this a problem? This is a problem because this is a direct, not even like a... forgot the word. There's a word, but I can't remember what it is. Not an approximation of, but there is a direct quoting of a BLM talking point. Paraphrase. There we go. This is not a paraphrase. This is a direct BLM talking point, that life is more important than property. Directly coming out of the mouth of a Wisconsin state prosecutor, directly quoting Black Lives Matter rhetoric. That is a problem. So this is a problem beyond the scope of this case, right? This doesn't just happen, right? This is a tangible result. You're seeing the tangible results in this case of decades of Soros-funded legal systems and Marxist theory and critical race theory in the law schools. This guy didn't just become someone who would parrot BLM talking points overnight. No, he's probably went through school in the last 15 years, had professors that liked Marxism, that taught critical race theory, that taught wokeness. He had 15 years ago when he was in law school, he was getting colored by all that stuff. And then over the last 15 years, his career was elevated by district attorneys and attorneys general and governors and mayors that were elected using Soros funding. And he was the cream of the crop for people who Soros chose. Soros chose prosecutors and defenders and all these attorneys and all that stuff. And he's one of the ones that rose through the rank enough to become one of Wisconsin's prosecutors that they picked for this. And it wasn't just that, he just recently had a conversion along with, half of the country to BLM talking points. No. I think that this is something that he actually believes. I think it's something that he didn't hear from BLM in the last 2 years. I think it's probably something that he heard 10 years ago, and he's actually believes it in his core. And that highlighted to me, not just within the context of this case, but within the context of like the entire national moment. They really, really degraded our core infrastructure here. Not our core infrastructure like physical stuff, but like legal infrastructure. The lawyers, the prosecutors, the state legal apparatus has been thoroughly, thoroughly degraded by what they've been doing in the schools secretly for decades now. This kind of goes back to a lot of other stuff that we've talked about in the show, for the last couple of years here, but there's this myth on the left for recent leftist walkaways that it's only the last couple of years that cancel culture got bad. It's only in the last couple of years that the left has become authoritarian. It's only in the last couple of years that the left has become a hotbed for Marxism and racism and all that stuff. And the truth is that it's not recent. It's just some of these walkaways recently noticed it, or they were recently attacked by it. But the truth is that these sorts of things have been on the left for several decades at this point, at least 20, if not 30 to 40 years. And what's the result of that? Well, the result of that is that you have the Wisconsin state prosecutor in an important political case quoting Black Lives Matter like it's breathing for him. And that's not to mention that, again, He's just wrong. Obviously, it's Black Lives Matter talking points, right? So is life more important than property? Oh, Fox, you heartless fuck. You mean to say that property is more important than life? Absolutely. Again, contextually. I would say that the wider context at this point is that for the state to be referencing that, oh, property is more important, or life is more important than property, that completely misses the context of the summer of 2020. I want this summer of 2021. Yeah, it was pretty quiet. I want you guys to go back, just in your minds, just hop in your mental time machine, go back to the summer of 2020. Go back to the end of the summer of 2020. This happened in late August of summer 2020. By the end of August of summer 2020, about 30 people had already been killed in other cities throughout the summer as a direct result of Black Lives Matter riots. By the end of the summer, after August, into September and October, and that started getting too cold for everybody, but over 30 people, almost 40 people in the summer of 2020 were killed as a direct result of the riots. Many of them directly by the rioters, having been, and that's not to mention the people that were like maimed and traumatically injured, horrific injuries sustained from the rioters. You had, again, in Portland, you had that one Trump supporter was just hunted down and executed by Antifa. You've seen videos of dozens of people just being curb stomped nearly to death by Antifa. You've had in Minnesota, you had people burned alive inside their small business that they own, their little store that they own. I'm sure that they worked, the first quarter of their lives to just get up enough money, and then they took out a gigantic business loan, and they made it. They own their own little business, and they're struggling to make rent payments, but they're doing it. They're doing it, and they love it, and this is theirs, and it's their small family business, and it's great, and it's all. And then some Black Lives Matter asshole throws a Molotov cocktail in there and burns you alive. There was people burned alive in Minnesota inside their small business not 2 months before this thing with Kyle happened. So for the state prosecutors to try to, from the safety of 14 months in the future, pretend that the summer of 2020 was just peaceful protests and that Kyle was defending property at the expense of life, and no one's life was at risk, that is outrageous. That is absolutely outrageous. And I really hope that at some point during the trial, that factoid or that comparison is brought back up, because it is not true that this was about exchanging life in defense of property. No, by this point in the summer of 2020, it was very much well known that if you died as a result of a riot, of a Black Lives Matter riot, if they actually just killed you outright, you might be one of the lucky ones, given the horrific injuries sustained by the people who didn't die, by the hundreds to thousands of people curb stomped and beat to death or near death. So no, while I think just the general statement on its face that life is more important than property is bullshit, because it's a loaded phrase meant to try to trick me into agreeing with it so I don't sound like a heartless fuck, but joke's on you. I am heartless. It just totally misses the context of what was going on in the summer of 2020 and the murderous atmosphere at the Black Lives Matter riots. So no, you don't just get to cite that. You don't just get to cite that the life you fought to keep is the evidence that you did not need to act in defense of that life. Oh, well, Kyle, he didn't lose his life. This wasn't about, losing your life. This was about defending property. No, this was about defending life. And so because Kyle got to keep his life because he defended it, the state does not get to cite Kyle's life that he fought for as a reason why he doesn't get to act in defense of his own life. That's outrageous. The only way the state would be happy with that logic is if Kyle died. Then all of a sudden, after Kyle died, then he retroactively had the right for self-defense. But if he prevents his death, then all of a sudden he doesn't have the right to self-defense? No, this is ridiculous. Alrighty, so there is a interesting thing. There's a little factoid that popped out from the case is that they don't know. There is an unknown individual that was involved. So Kyle shot Rosenbaum. He then shot at who they are calling Dropkick Man. Yes, Dropkick Man. Which is funny, but they're calling him unknown individual and Dropkick Man as kind of because they don't know who he is. So you've got Kyle shot and killed Rosenbaum. He was chased on the street and was knocked over by Anthony Hubert, perhaps. They then Dropkick Man kicked him, and Kyle aimed and shot twice at Dropkick Man. Missed both times. Then he had Anthony Hubert come up on him with a skateboard, shot and killed Anthony Hubert. Then he had Gage come up on him, and Kyle, as I'm very fond of saying, literally disarmed Gage. But we don't know who Dropkick Man is. They are referring to him in the case as, in the trial, they're talking about him as Dropkick Man or unknown individual. And I find it fascinating that they don't know who he is. That was actually, I don't know if it's necessarily breaking news, but it was definitely breaking news to me that they didn't know who that person was, because that person is one of the people cited in one of the 6 charges that Kyle recklessly endangered the life of this unknown individual. And the prosecutor and the defense and the state have all tried to reach out and find this unknown individual, and they've not been able to find him. They've been unable to find him. And my guess is, given that Kyle had 3 random people that he shot, and one of them was a horrific pedophile rapist. Again, just to kind of give you the brief overview of Rosenbaum's crimes, raping multiple 5-year-olds, raping them horrifically. Somehow he only gets 12 years for multiple counts of raping 5-year-olds. Then you've got Anthony, who the state, we'll get to him in a second. He serially beat his girlfriends. He had a rap sheet of dozens, more than 20, domestic, brutal domestic violence charges. Then you had Gage, who was disarmed again, had a felony rap sheet a mile long. So Kyle just picked out 3 random people. I know he didn't pick them out. I'm just being, quick hand with my language here. Flip it. Kyle picked out 3 random Antifa BLM members, and they were all the most violent thug criminals you can imagine. So who was the unknown individual? Well, statistically, he was a felon. Statistically, he was a felon with a rap sheet as long as his arm. And my guess is that he probably had a pending warrant of some kind. Now, again, I just want to be clear. I am speculating all of this right now, but you guys can probably follow me on the logic trail here. My guess is that unknown individual, Dropkick Man, probably had a felony rap sheet. He probably had outstanding warrants. And when he saw in the news that they were looking for him, he probably was like, yeah, no, I'm getting the fuck out of Dodge here, because they might let me testify in the Rittenhouse case, but then they're going to put me in jail for 20 years. So that's probably why Dropkick Man will remain unknown for the foreseeable future. Though, if they ever find him, you heard it here first, that he's probably a felon. All right. So I also thought it was funny too that they can track your grandma across the country if she liked a Facebook post about January 6th, but they can't find a dude that was attacking a child and had this attack captured from 4 or 5 camera angles all at once. Somehow they can't find him, but they can find your grandma if she liked the wrong Facebook post. All right. So this was new information that was revealed by the prosecutors during their opening statements. Give me a second here. So this was new information for everybody. First time heard today. Kyle's follow me through the he said she said thing here. All right. So Kyle's sister has a boyfriend. Kyle's sister's boyfriend purchased Kyle's gun for him. Kyle gave him money. when he was 16. So Kyle at 16 gave his sister's boyfriend money to go purchase a MP15. So I think this is Smith & Wesson's MP15, because the defense clarified that this wasn't an AR-15, because AR is actually a brand, right? It's a platform, and it's also a brand, and various other gun companies will give custom names to their AR-15, though it is okay to flippantly call them AR-15s, even if they have a more specific name. I, for instance, have the FN-15, which is a AR-15 platform from FN. The MP, which I think it might be the M&P 15. I'll have to do some more research on it. I'm just guessing, but I've got a Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 for my pistol, and I would love to get an M&P AR, so that my M&P 15, which is Smith & Wesson's AR-15 platform. That way I can have my Smith & Wesson loadout for the Boogaloo. So I think that's the gun that he has. I'll do some more research on that for next time, but I'm pretty sure he has a Smith & Wesson's AR-15, which is called the MP15. I could be wrong on that, but I'll look into that. So where I was going with this is his MP15, Kyle's sister's boyfriend, Kyle gave his sister's boyfriend money at 16 to go buy him a rifle, and then Kyle's sister's boyfriend did, which is illegal. That's called a straw purchase. You're not allowed to do that, because Kyle's sister's boyfriend said that the gun was for him, said that it wasn't for Kyle. So that's a problem. That's a felony. The rifle was then stored at Kyle's sister's boyfriend's stepdad's house. Hopefully you're following me here. And the stepdad kept it in a gun safe, and it stayed there. And then it sounded like Kyle was very good friends with his sister's boyfriend, which that sounds like a great, fun relationship. And they would go shooting a lot. And so whenever they went shooting, Kyle's sister's boyfriend would grab his rifle out of the gun case and bring it to him wherever they were shooting at, and then he would take it back. I believe that the opening statement, I believe that the way it was framed was that this night that Kyle went out with his rifle, that was the first time he had asked to have it out when he wasn't with his sister's boyfriend, and wasn't out for recreational purposes. So that was kind of the first time that he had used it in that manner. Let's see here. Somebody, Triumvirate, sending me Pasobic's status here. Oh, okay. That, I appreciate that, Triumvirate. I will be getting to the FBI overhead cam, and I will reference that tweet when we get to it. Thank you very much for posting that in chat. Let's see here. So the state, let's see here. Oh, the state prosecutors, during their opening statement, they stated that at a certain point the situation had moved on, and that the car lot that Kyle was guarding, that it wasn't in danger anymore because the situation had moved on, is the way that they phrased it. And that was just really that was really rich. This was night 2 of riots that, like, I mean, of the riots we saw over the summer, Kenosha was definitely like in the top 3, I would say. The fire, for one thing. You can judge a riot by how glowy the sky is with flame from the city, and Kenosha's sky was pretty glowy that night. And the night that Kyle's incident happened, that was the second night of riots. And so for the state prosecutor to say, oh, well, you know, the car lot that Kyle was guarding, you know, the riot had moved on to another block, and the situation had moved on, and it was obvious. They literally said, quote, it was obvious the danger had moved on. It was obvious that the danger had moved on. And I just gotta say, fuck off to the state prosecutor. Like, really, like the state prosecutor, like, obviously that's ridiculous, right? That the danger had moved on. The danger had moved on the morning before, after the first night, and the riot came back. Riots don't just not come back. It's not like locusts where they eat up one area and then they just come back to it, or they don't come back to it because they've eaten all of it. If the locusts swarm, if they ate cars like what the rioters were doing, if they swarmed through and they missed a car lot because Kyle was guarding it, don't you think eventually they might want to come back to that? I think that's a pretty reasonable assumption. I think it's actually completely unreasonable to assume that if a riot has passed your block by and is still going on the next block, I think it's completely unreasonable to think that it won't come back. And so for the state prosecutor during opening testimony to say, oh, well, it was clear that the danger had passed. Like, I really hope that there's some critical thinkers on the jury here. Now, I was a little joking, but kind of a little nervous too, watching jury selection. The trope is a jury of your peers, right? And I sent a text to Dyer, and I was like, more like a jury of your dullards, right? And that's the problem. Is you've got these elitist lawyers that you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to. They're managing both sides of the case. And there's an elitist judge who's getting paid with your tax dollars hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then you get judged by the least critical thinkers and most uninformed people in your community. Because why would I say that? I'm not intentionally harassing these people. It's just the jury selection, by the nature of the jury selection, if you are an informed citizen, you are not eligible for the jury because you know too much about it. You've quote unquote biased yourself. And your more informed people are the people who are more likely to be critical thinkers because they're going out and seeking information to critically think about. The type of people who don't go out and seek information don't critically think about things. So we've set up a system where jury selection, by its nature, is filtering out the likely critical thinkers, and you're left with the dullards who are uninformed and don't think about stuff, who've never thought about stuff. I mean, unfortunately, you're going to be having people deciding on a verdict here. And I know, right? It's, Fox, aren't you supposed to be like, American patriot and, all this, conservative and constitutional stuff? And aren't you really just kind of tearing apart the whole idea of a trial system? Yeah, I am. It's stupid. I don't like it. I don't know if there's another better solution to it, but certainly there is some horrific problems with the current one, and I think that this case kind of makes that very clear. But yeah, you've got a process where you're filtering out the critical thinkers from the jury pool, and what's left is a bunch of dullards who don't look into stuff. They don't form opinions about stuff. They don't have any knowledge about the world that's going on. If they do, they don't critically think about it and come to an opinion one way or the other on it. They're just kind of, meh. They're the NPCs. You're basically filtering for NPCs that just aren't formatted one way or the other. Just because you're not a leftist doesn't mean you're not an NPC, right? There's NPCs on the right as well, and then there's NPCs that are unformatted. They're not left or right, but they just aren't capable of independent action. They just haven't been co-opted by one side or the other, and that's typically what your jury is going to be. Your jury is going to be unformatted NPCs, centrist NPCs, the best kind. Jesus Christ. All right, so we've got the state prosecutors said that Rosenbaum was just caught up. He was just caught up in the protest after having been discharged from the hospital. He wasn't there on purpose. He left the hospital and was just caught up in the protest. We're going to come back to this caught up in the protest thing. That's actually going to be one of the clips that we watch. Give me just a second here. All right. The state prosecutor at one point suggests that Kyle could have circumvented a police barricade at one point, but chose not to. And that's proof that he really was hunting down Rosenbaum. If he had just broken, ostensibly because he was baying for blood, and if he hadn't been so bloodthirsty, he would have just disobeyed the cops and circumvented their barrier. So one of the reasons why Kyle ended up in the location that he ended up in was because he had tried to go north in the city to a location where other people that he knew were in a kind of a safe location, and he was trying to go back there to regroup. And on his way, he encountered a police barricade that had the road closed off. And he talked to the police. He asked them, he's like, hey, I got some friends up there. I'm looking to go hang out with them. And the police turned him around and sent him back south where he would inevitably meet up with Rosenbaum. The state prosecutor actually said in the opening statement that if Kyle had really wanted to, he could have just walked a few blocks to the west and gotten around the police barricade. So the state's position is that Kyle really didn't want us. He really wanted to go back and hunt down Rosenbaum. And if he really hadn't wanted to go back and hunt down Rosenbaum, he would have instead circumvented a lawful police order. That's the state's prosecution's opening statement. That is as rich as it gets. Let's see here. I really wish you could just do opening statements like in a debate style, because that would be fun. Because the stuff's they get to just say this stuff unopposed, and it's just nonsense. And the reason why I'm concerned about the reason why I brought up the jury earlier is that I look at all this stuff and I see that's clear nonsense, right? But the jury, if it's just like, again, a jury of your dullards, are they going to notice that? Are they going to critically think about the paradox that was just said there? And the answer is likely no. Why do I recognize paradoxes? Especially in speech and in legal arguments or persuasive arguments. Yeah, persuasive arguments. Why would I be quickly able to recognize a paradox in a legal or a persuasive argument? Why would you be able to do that? Because we are informed in politics and in world events. To be informed in politics and world events, you have to continuously be analyzing information, especially when you're looking at politicians, because they say all kinds of paradoxical nonsense all the time, and you have to be able to parse that out. And so we have a lot of experience doing that. If you're somebody who doesn't have a firm political position one way or the other right now, you're probably not doing that, which means you are not well practiced in identifying verbal rhetorical tricks or rhetorical paradoxes in that way. So I hear the opening statement from the prosecutor, and I say, I don't need to see much of the facts of the case. I can see 4 or 5 times where you've contradicted yourself over the course of 10 minutes. You're obviously lying. You're either lied the first time or you lied the second time, or you're intentionally trying to trick me. But these people, and I don't know a lot about them. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe they're all rocket scientists. So in fact, we did know what some of their occupations were. But are they going to, if they aren't well versed in having political opinions, are they going to see through some of that stuff, or are they going to be tricked and persuaded by the defense? That's my concern, especially when you look at that previous issue with Richie Mcginnis, where it is a issue entirely buried in nuance. And if like I said, the state prosecutor, very well spoken, very smooth, very good cadence, very calming to listen to. I believed everything he said, except for all the things that he said, except for the words. I believed everything he said because he was very good speaker. And so is that going to cause a problem when we get to the Richie Mcginnis part of the trial and the state has this very calming explanation that's filled with logical paradoxes, and all the jury hears is the calming tone of the voice? Is that going to be a problem? I sure hope it's not, but it could be, and I really don't want it to be. Let's see here. I just want to reiterate again, the state suggested that Kyle could have circumvented a police line if he'd really wanted to. And that because he didn't disobey a police order, that means he was hunting Rosenbaum. I think that's hilarious. The FBI will testify. So actually, that comes back to Triumvirate's tweet that he sent me. Thank you very much, Triumvirate. So the FBI will be testifying in the case. Why would the FBI be testifying in the case? Well, it turns out, and this was brand new news, this was actually breaking news, the FBI had been flying a surveillance plane, not a drone, I believe it wasn't, there was actually a manned craft in the sky that night, and they had an infrared camera so they could see heat. It was like basically like a military drone camera, so you got the kind of black and white with the whiter spots or the hot spots. I'll show you guys some of the video clips here in a second. But the FBI had a surveillance plane in the sky that night with infrared cameras trained on Kenosha. And this is fascinating. From the sky, the most interesting thing going on at the moment of Kyle shooting Rosenbaum was apparently Kyle shooting Rosenbaum, because the FBI footage from the plane was perfectly centered on that parking lot. So of the entire city, of all the things going on, that parking lot was immediately the most interesting thing going on. And it turned out to be several seconds later that, yeah, that's where the most interesting thing of the night in the city was going on at, because they caught the whole shooting from the sky. So and we'll go over some of this stuff probably later in the week, because I didn't compile a lot of the video clips. Again, this is meant to be highlights from the trial, not necessarily a full background on everything that happened, but we now have all of the video footage that there was. There was so much video footage of this incident. There's now additional video footage from this FBI surveillance plane from the sky with heat imagery, which is crazy. Now, let's see here. Let's read this tweet from Jack Posobiec that Triumvirate was kind enough to send me. So Posobic's breaking this along with me here. So it's exclusive. It's not exclusive. Direwolf Media is bringing it to you, and I'm bringing it to you from a primary source. This actually is what we mostly do commentary on the show, right? This is actually journalism, because I actually watched the raw trial feed, and I'm bringing you the actual information. I'm actually being a journalist today. I'm Richie Mcginnis, except for, I'm doing journalism. So from Jack Posobiec, we've got exclusive. FBI testified in private that there is a second version of the surveillance tape in HD. Now, I'll get back to that in a second. There's a second version of the surveillance tape in HD that they did not provide to the defense, per courtroom member. The defense had requested a copy of the HD tape. The FBI responded that the HD tape no longer exists. Yeah, because the under the Obama administration, we built the NSA this stupidly large server farm so they could bulk dragnet collect all your text messages and dick pics. But we just don't have enough server space for the FBI to save a video of a major national self-defense case for 14 months. They somehow just don't have enough hard drive space for that. So during the trial, during the opening statements, which I'll get into the defense's opening statements here in a second, but the defense opened with some videos and pictures from that night, and one of them was this new aerial footage from the FBI that we saw. And the defense attorney actually testified, as part of his opening statement, he referenced that the video cuts off at a weird time. It would be nice if there was a little bit more to the tape, a little bit longer on both sides there. And he said he's not sure who cut the tape so short and why it was in lower quality than what you might imagine. And now we can see here from Jack Posobiec. Again, this is at 5:30 p.m., which was about 2 hours ago. It turns out that the FBI actually did have the longer, higher quality, unedited version of that clip. So I guess we'll see if that's able to be admitted into evidence and what goes on with that. Jack Posobiec, also go look at his Twitter, which actually I'll probably pull it up here. Jack Posobiec also released, his organization was able to get the full video. Let's see here. Is that this it? Yeah, there we go. So he was able to get the video of the FBI. Yeah, so here you can see up on screen here, this white aerial footage. That's new video that we've seen from the FBI. So, and you guys can go to Jack's Twitter here and watch this full video. But basically, we've already had multiple videos compositing all of the individual videos together to show the full composite of what was going on. They lined up all the time frames and strung them all together so you could see from multiple angles at the same time everything that was going on. And we've now been able to, in the last hour or so here, Jack's been able to get a hold of this FBI video, which they did not release to the public. Somehow Jack was able to get a hold of it. Good job on him. And actually, I mean, they should have released it to the public. It's the FBI. It's you pay for the FBI. It's your information. It's like the photos of the moon. So they've now been able to, Jack's been able to string together this aerial footage alongside the rest of the footage, and you can follow it along in real time from multiple angles. And so you can kind of, as you lose track of people in these shaky cam cell videos, you can keep track of the people in the aerial footage. Now, I'm sure that it's only been out for a few hours, so not nearly enough time to keep track of everybody. But the prosecutors, the defense and the prosecutors have already done some of the legwork of keeping track of people. You can see here on the screen, they've got people circled on both frames, so you can kind of keep track of them. So this will be interesting. I'm sure we'll probably try and do a little bit more of a breakdown on this in the coming week, but very interesting. The brand new footage was released, so that's pretty big. That's a pretty big deal, especially again thank you Triumvirate sharing me this tweet. It appears that the defense being confused about the quality and the length of the tape sounds like the FBI was playing games with them. We'll see what happens with that. That's so surprising. The FBI was playing games with them. Man, that's weird. Let's see here. There's more video from the aerial footage of Kyle actually shooting Rosenbaum. I don't know if that's the video Jack got, because I wrote this before Jack was able to get a handle on that video. So maybe Jack's actually got that. Maybe you guys can go see that on your own. I guess I'll check after the stream. But I'll be very interested to see that video synced up from the sky with Kyle having shot Rittenhouse, because then you can really get a lay of the land. I mean, that'll be really something from a juror's perspective. In a self-defense shooting, you usually are just reliant on testimony. Thank you, Mist Mountain, for following. Much appreciated. You're really dependent on testimony in a self-defense shooting usually. It's very rare that you've got it documented from like 18 different angles, which Kyle has. So I think it's rather obvious from the video footage that Kyle is in a self-defense situation, that they were acting aggressively towards him, and he had very little choice but to shoot the people he did. And there's plenty of footage of him not shooting people who weren't presenting a direct threat to him. And having an additional, and that was just from what we had seen the last year, having, again, in the last hour or last couple hours here, this revelation of additional footage from the sky, getting to be able to see a bird's eye view of where all the pieces on the chessboard are in real time, that is going to create this incredible three-dimensional recreation of what happened. And you don't really need to rely on anybody's testimony. The video will speak for itself, provided the jurors have the mental faculties to hear it. Let's see here. They've also identified, so they weren't able to identify Jump Kick Man, but they've identified the person who shot first. So there was wide speculation at the time of the shooting back last summer when we covered this, that somebody else had shot a gun somewhere else, and that Kyle, when he turned around, thought that perhaps they were shooting at him. Now, it doesn't matter if they were shooting at Kyle or not. It matters if Kyle thought they were shooting at him. So that's part of the burden of self-defense. So if Kyle believed his life to be in danger, it doesn't matter if it was in danger with the gift of foresight from the future. You can't look back on it from the future and say, oh, well, we're going to rejudge the past. It matters about, at that point in time, did Kyle think that his life was in danger? Did Kyle think somebody was shooting at him? And there's a lot of reason to believe that he did believe that. And there, again, at the time, there was this thought that there was a first shooter somewhere else, and that's what had triggered Kyle into thinking, oh, somebody's shooting at me. It's since been revealed. This is kind of, I don't know if it's breaking news, but it's breaking confirmed today during the trial that the state prosecutor, they actually have a named individual. I forget what his name is. It's not really important, but they actually is a named individual who shot his a pistol into the air. He was approximately 30 feet away from Kyle and Rosenbaum when he did. And he just shot a handgun into the air. So that right there, that gives all the credence in the world, because there was some question about, well, was it really a gunshot? Because if it wasn't really a gunshot and Kyle just, he was hearing phantoms and just started shooting because he heard phantom gunshot noises, well, that's a problem. But if there's a confirmed gunshot, well, that becomes much less of a problem. Let's see here. Richie Mcginnis is going to testify against Kyle. The state prosecutors say the state prosecutors have identified Richie Mcginnis as a journalist. Fox disagrees. Let's see here. I had a Fox thought. I was writing. So basically, what I did today is I watched through the jury selection and I watched through the first day of the trial, and I just wrote notes, just kind of stream of consciousness as I was writing. As I heard interesting things, I just started typing stuff out. So I don't even know what I wrote here, but this was in real time while I was listening to the prosecutor make their opening statement. Okay, so I remember what this was in reference to. So the state made a big deal that Kyle made he was on the news earlier that night, and he said he had a first aid kit and he was an EMT and all this stuff. And the state said, I think it's really interesting that Kyle shot Rosenbaum. Then, he made such a big deal about being an EMT, and then he never rendered aid to Rosenbaum. And the state's trying to make it like there was some obligation that Kyle had to render aid to Rosenbaum. And I don't really need to go much into it because the defense will later. But there's a lot of reasons why Kyle was unable to render aid to Rosenbaum at the moment, but that's mostly because Rosenbaum's pedo and wife-beater buddies were chasing him down already. But my Fox thought here is that you don't have any obligation to protect or treat somebody who was attacking you. There's really no obligation to be a good Samaritan. I actually, back when I was in grade school, high school, and college, I was a lifeguard for a long time. And my state, my senior year of high school, my state passed a new law that was there used to be the statute where it was called the Good Samaritan Law, and that means different things in different states. But in my state, what it meant was if you are a lifeguard or a certified EMT or a doctor or somebody who's capable of rendering medical aid or trained to render medical aid, and you're off duty, so you're not rendering aid in your professional capacity, and you happen upon somebody who requires medical aid, you can, under Good Samaritan laws, render them medical aid and not face additional liability as if you end up injuring them in some way. You're protected by a Good Samaritan law. That Good Samaritan law also provides for you no obligation to assist. So if you are a trained medical professional and you happen upon somebody who has an injury, you aren't obligated to treat them. And if they end up dying, you don't have any liability for that. This is important because there are states where there's a paradox where you have the simultaneous obligation to help somebody on or off duty, and if you harm them, you can face massive liability charges. So my state, my senior year of high school, changed the law, and I was a lifeguard, and they created an obligation. You were obligated to help. I immediately turned in my lifeguard certification and quit my job as a lifeguard. Now, it wasn't a big deal because, this is my senior year of college. That wasn't a big deal because I was graduating college, and I wasn't going to be a lifeguard forever. But I did that because I don't like the idea that I am now forced, I am now obligated, I owe somebody my services. And if I don't give to them my services, I am liable for any amount of damages they may want to pull from me. I don't like that. That's a little bit Marxist, a little bit socialist, that I owe somebody my services. Now, I may well want to freely render them aid, but if you've now turned that into an obligation to render aid, I don't want anything to fucking do with it. Here's my lifeguard certification. You can have it back. I'm done. And that's what I did. And that's why I did. And so the state, that's the same thing in Wisconsin. You don't actually Wisconsin didn't change their law. You don't have an obligation to render aid. And the state is trying to imply that, well, there's a moral obligation to render aid. And while there may or may not be a moral obligation to render aid, there's not a legal obligation to render aid, and the state is trying to muddy that with the jury. It is a very dirty tactic that they're using. They're trying to impugn his character, imply that was LARPing as an EMT and had no intention of rendering aid. And that's a lie, because there is video of Kyle rendering aid to other people that night, other rioters even, who had hurt themselves rioting. And so the state prosecutor was trying to make the case that, well, Kyle had an obligation to render aid and he didn't, probably because he's an evil white supremacist. And it's just not true. He did not have an obligation to render aid. And there was a lot of reason why it was unsafe for him to render aid at that moment. Let's see here. The state prosecutor, in their opening statement, they continuously cited that hundreds of people that night in Kenosha, that hundreds of people were experiencing the exact same thing that Kyle did. They were experiencing the same kinds of confrontations and the same kinds of close quarters and people pushing each other around and all that sort of stuff. And hundreds of people that night were experiencing the exact same thing Kyle did, yet Kyle was the only one who killed anybody. And this is complete bullshit. So, especially coming from a lawyer. So there's this little thing called nuance. Some people have heard of it before, but it's just a little teeny tiny thing. No two situations are exactly the same. It's literally a lie to say, and I was basically direct quoting there. The state said hundreds of people experiencing they used the word exact same situation that Kyle did, yet Kyle was the only one who killed anyone. Again, that's actually literally a lie. There's no two situations that are exactly the same. It's just a lie to say that Kyle's situation was exactly the same as anyone else who didn't shoot someone that night. And it's a little bit wild for a lawyer to say that anyways, because the legal system is based on nuance, right? It's not just, oh, well, this person did the exact same thing as the person who got prosecuted last month, so no need for a trial. We'll just say it's the exact same thing. No need for nuance or anything like that. No, that's the whole point of the legal system. And lawyers, their job is to tease out the nuance between different situations and to show how they're different and not the exact same thing. So it's a little, again, paradoxical statements, right? So I hear that and I can identify it as a paradoxical rhetorical trick. Did the jury notice that? I don't know. The state says that they have new videos that haven't been released yet, so I guess we'll see what those are. This was my favorite one. So the state prosecutor tried to humanize Anthony Hubert, who was the skateboarder that took one to the chest. So the State Department, the state prosecutor said that Anthony Hubert was actually a personal friend of Jacob Blake. That Anthony Hubert, he lived for skateboarding, and he was only out to protest because he personally knew Jacob Blake. Now, I'll give you guys I'll give it a pause for a second here and let you guys think about why that's funny. Well, I'm going to jump right into it here. So, I was working, listening to this in the background. I had up the Word document, typing out my notes as I heard interesting things. And I happened to be taking a sip of a Monster Zero while the state said that Anthony Hubert was a personal friend of Jacob Blake. And I actually spit a little bit of it out on my keyboard and then really did my best to not laugh my ass off at my desk in the middle of my office, because here's why. Anthony Hubert was a known, and we looked up his record. We were able to pull from the Kenosha public records Anthony Hubert's criminal record. We did this on the show last year. Sure, it's way back in the archive, but other people have done this too. Anthony Hubert, who Kyle cured of being self-defense, Anthony Hubert was a serial domestic abuser, like really hardcore beatings, like really, really aggressive domestic violence charges, a dozen of them or more. So Anthony Hubert just absolutely beat the fuck out of his girlfriends, right? Jacob Blake, what was Jacob Blake doing when the cops came to arrest him? Oh, he was raping his baby mama, who he serially raped over the course of years and was also in the process of stealing her children. But he serially raped girls. And the state is trying to humanize Anthony Hubert by saying, oh, Anthony Hubert, domestic abuser, bestie friends with Jake Blake, the rapist. And it's just so funny because of course they knew each other. Like, now that you mention it, yeah, of course they knew each other. They probably traded tips on how best to beat and rape their girls. Of course they knew each other. It's just fucking hilarious that the state thought, oh, what if we try to humanize Anthony Hubert by saying that, he was just best friends with Jacob Blake, and they were just good friends together. And, it really tells you what kind of person Anthony is, that he was such good friends with Jacob Blake, this black man. And, you're just good old boys. You're just hanging out, raping and beating their wives. Like, I think it's hilarious. If you had told me that Jacob Blake, the rapist, and Anthony Hubert, the wife beater, were best friends a year ago, I'd have said that's funny, but like, come on, guys, come on. But now you've got the state. They had the opening statement for the state prosecutor was like 15 minutes. I mean, 15 minutes is a good amount of time, but like, it's not a lot of time when you're trying to like pack into a case this complicated with 6 charges. And during that 15 minutes, they thought that it was a worthwhile investment to spend a few words telling the jury that the wife beater was best friends with the wife raper. Now, there's a reason why the state's doing this. Why would the state do this? Because obviously, here I am again, pulling out because I'm an informed critical thinker, and I know these things. So when the state says this, I know I'm informed enough to pull additional context from elsewhere and say, wait a minute. But is the jury going to do that? Well, no, because all of the people who are informed about the case, they already filtered that out. Oh, well, maybe the defense, maybe Kyle's defense can inform them of the context that, yes, Anthony Hubert was friends with Jacob Blake, but don't forget Anthony Hubert beat his wife and or beat his girlfriends, and Jacob Blake raped them. Well, let's not forget about that. Well, the defense can't do that. The defense can't. Kyle's defense isn't allowed to bring up the previous criminal records. So that's why the state did this. That's why the state said that. So again, it's this misframing that the defense isn't allowed to counter, because to counter it would involve bringing up the history, the criminal history of these people that Kyle shot. Now, obviously their criminal histories are relevant here because it creates a character. They're going to have character witnesses for all of the people Kyle shot to try to paint them in a good light. But the best character witness would be their rap sheet. But the rap sheet's not allowed to make a testimony here. So that is why I think it's hilarious that the state prosecutors thought that it would be, humanizing that the serial girlfriend beater was best friends with the serial rapist. But unfortunately, the jury is probably not going to know that. They're probably not going to be able to make that connection. The jury is probably going to hear that, oh, well, Anthony should have been out there. He was protesting for his friend that got shot, and he loved to skateboard, and he's just a human like you or I. When the reality is that Anthony Hubert was a fucking animal. So was Rosenbaum, and so was Jacob Blake. But is the jury going to know that? Are they going to be able to pull that context in and help make a decision as to what was the state of mind of these people, of these brutal animals? What was their state of mind at the time that they were running after Kyle Rittenhouse? Was it correct for Kyle Rittenhouse to have recognized their state of mind as murderous? I think yes. Will the jury? I sure hope so. Alrighty. Let's see here. The state also, they also add a little icing on the cake there after they mentioned that Anthony was friends with Jacob Blake. They also said, during this trial, we promised to let you know what kind of person Anthony was. And I think that they're probably lying. I think that they're probably going to fabricate a persona for Anthony. But if they're serious about telling us what kind of person Anthony is, the kind of person who would serially beat girls, I'm all for it. But I think that's not the type. I don't think that's the type of personality that they're talking about showing us. All right. So between so I just went through all of the prosecution's opening statements. Next, we had the opening statement from the defense, but between that, there was some crosstalk between the lawyers and the judge, and this is where there was some more giggling moments, but there was also some stern moments here too. And I'll probably finish this episode off with wow, we're going way longer than I thought we would. I'll probably finish this episode off with watching a video of this exchange, because I think it's highly relevant, or we might start off the next episode with it. But basically, they sent the jury out, and the defense, hold on a second. The defense had a plan for their opening statement to involve a lot of show and tell with videos and pictures. The prosecution argued to the judge that this was irregular, they characterized the opening for the defense that the defense had planned. They characterized it as irregular because of all the pictures. A lot of those pictures and videos were going to be admitted as evidence, and the prosecutor, the state, said, well, it's not really common for you to use all of these evidence articles in an opening statement. Normally you would kind of show those during the trial, but you're going to show them all during your opening statement, and that's kind of weird. I think I kind of agree that it's a little bit weird, but I really don't see a problem with it from just like a lay perspective. The judge agreed. He said that it's really common in civil court cases that you would show some of the evidence items during an opening presentation, but it's not really common to do that in criminal cases, which this is. But the judge says this is not an unlawful act, even if it is irregular. And even though the Kyle's defense, they had like a record number of evidence articles that were going to be a part. It was like 40 or 50 pictures and videos that were a part of the opening statement. Even though it was a record in Wisconsin, the judge said it's not his place to determine how and in what manner the defense makes their case. So he allowed it. The prosecution also, the defense took issue with something the prosecution said during their opening statement. So the prosecution had opened with saying that Rosenbaum couldn't stay at his girlfriend's house after he left the hospital. So it was revealed that Rosenbaum, before the day that he died, earlier that day, he had been released from the hospital. He had gone to his girlfriend's house, which, I mean, imagine being the girlfriend of a guy who raped 5-year-old boys, like 6 or 7 5-year-old boys, and then like you want to be his girlfriend. What a lady. So again, the prosecution during their opening statement, they said that Rosenbaum had left the hospital earlier that morning. He had gone to his girlfriend's house and he was unable to stay at her house. My thought was possibly because he beat her. We found out why he couldn't stay there later on, but my initial thought was that it was probably because he beat her. The state said that it was not relevant about Rosenbaum's history. So this is where I just said the state and the judge have made it this rule where Kyle's defense is not allowed to bring up the criminal histories of the people that he shot, even though I think it's highly relevant. But at the same time, the state is allowed to give these heartwarming stories about how Anthony Hubert, quote, lived for skateboarding and was good friends with Jacob Blake. But the defense isn't allowed to bring up how Anthony Hubert, between being friends with Jacob Blake, the rapist, and living for skateboarding, beat his girlfriends. The defense asked why was Rosenbaum actually at his girlfriend's house at all when he had a no contact order. So again, they had sent out the jury, so the lawyers and the judge were allowed to discuss more openly the criminal histories. The reason why Rosenbaum, after leaving the hospital that morning, was unable to stay at his girlfriend's house is because he had a no contact order with her, basically a restraining order. The state, so the defense asked, you guys mentioned that he wasn't able to stay at his girlfriend's house. Why didn't you mention why he couldn't stay at his girlfriend's house? And the state said, well, it's not really relevant that there was a restraining order. If you're going to mention that he can't stay at the house, yeah, I'd say that you probably got to say why he can't stay at the house, right? And so the defense said, isn't it a little weird that Rosenbaum was even at his girlfriend's house if there was a restraining order? And the state responded that we don't know if it was illegal or not because you can't litigate whether or not he broke the restraining order since he's dead. Which I guess is true. The defense says that Rosenbaum was in a mental hospital, whereas the state prosecutor was trying to just qualify it as a hospital. But I think it's highly relevant that you put a adjective next to hospital and modify it to be mental hospital. Basically, the hospital is relevant because Rosenbaum had gotten out of the hospital that day. There is a video of Rosenbaum saying that he just got out of jail. So there's lots of video from during the riots of Rosenbaum hours before he was shot, of Rosenbaum being bombastic and yelling and cursing at people. But one of the things he said during those videos was, I just got out of jail. I just got out of jail today. But where he really got out of was a mental hospital, apparently. That's what the defense is saying. So the judge kind of went back and forth with them, and that's something that maybe we'll close off this episode with, is watching that exchange. But basically, the state would like very much for the jury to not be aware that Rosenbaum was at a mental hospital earlier that day, and that he had a restraining order against his girlfriend, or that his girlfriend had a restraining order against him for whatever reason. Let's see here. Then we get to the opening statement by the defense. The case is not about if Kyle shot these people, right? So that's what the defense kind of opened up with. This is about this case is whether or not Kyle has privilege under the self-defense statute to have shot them. It's not about whether or not he shot them. That's known. It's known that he shot them. It's whether or not he is under the privilege of self-defense when he shot them. In the opening statement, Kyle's defense, one of the lawyers quoted Rosenbaum in a video. You guys might know which video I'm talking about if you've been following this at all in the last year. And the defense attorney actually said the N-word fully out loud twice. Based. The defense also says that Richie Mcginnis will testify that he chose. So we're back to Richie Mcginnis again. Like I said, Richie Mcginnis is going to be he's supposed to be a journalist, right? He's supposed to be like an observer. And yet he's in the center of this fucking thing, being mentioned over and over and over again, because he's going to end up being a sticky point for Kyle here. So the defense says that Richie Mcginnis will testify that he chose to follow Kyle and one of Kyle's friends after interviewing them earlier in the night. So why was Richie Mcginnis in the vicinity of Kyle? Because Richie Mcginnis chose to follow Kyle around. You can't just choose to follow somebody around that is in a dangerous situation and has a gun and then be like, why did he shoot when I was near him? You chose to follow him. Sorry, a little dry in the throat here. We're almost done though. Okay, so after saying the N-word twice, the defense was so excited that he actually stumbled over his next sentence and really screwed up saying, I think he was trying to say Black Lives Matter, and I think he ended up saying Black Matters. And I think he was just so excited at having said the full N-word in front of a crowd of people on national TV and just lost track of his next sentence. This is where I was saying it's not a problem that he said the N-word. It's just that he was inelegant in his cadence and tone and keeping his voice even. And like I said, it's not the biggest deal. It wasn't a train wreck by any means. It was just the state prosecutor had perfect articulation, perfect cadence. Every word was crisp, well pronounced, all very calming, very decisive way of speaking. He had a very convincing tone of voice. Again, just listening to the music quality of the voice of the prosecutor, the state prosecutor, was excellent. Kyle's defense attorney, not as good. And again, is it the biggest deal in the world? No, but it's kind of sets the tone quite literally for how they're going to be going. So it's just an opening impression. We've got maybe 2.5 weeks of lots and lots of evidence, lots of videos that really speak for themselves. I don't think that the jury is going to look back on the opening statements and that's going to be the make or break moment for their verdict. But it helps if you've got a strong voice speaking for you on your behalf. Not to say that the content wasn't good. The content of the defense was great, well conveyed, just not as musically as the state prosecutors. The defense also, here we go with the not quite as elegant in speaking. The defense attorney in this opening statement accidentally said the word victim when referring to Rosenbaum and Anthony Hubert. Why is this a problem? This is a huge deal that the defense attorney, that Kyle's defense attorney accidentally called the people that Kyle shot victims. This is a huge deal because, as I said earlier in the show, last week during pretrial, the judge had made a special note during the pretrial phase that the people Kyle shot and shot at were not victims, that the state had wanted to label them as victims, but the judge says no, the state has not proved that they're victims. You can call them rioters, you can call them looters, you can call them arsonists, you can maybe call them people. I would call maybe some of them pedophiles, but you cannot call them victims because the state has to prove that they are victims. The state has not yet proved that they're victims. So Kyle's defense attorney accidentally calling them victims and then having to backtrack on his sentence, that doesn't look real great. That was a pretty big oopsies, and that was an oopsies. That was for sure an oopsies. Let's see here. My Fox thought I wrote here contemporaneously is just, again, what I've been reiterating is just that the state was very well spoken. The defense was a little rougher on the edges. Not a train wreck, just a little rougher on the edges. Let's see here. This was interesting. So the Kyle's defense in the opening statement brought up this fact, which I thought was very interesting. So Anthony Hubert, who was, again, the skateboarder that was, serially beat his girlfriends and was friends with Jacob Blake, the rapist. Anthony Hubert's girlfriend did not provide to the court his skateboard as evidence. So in the videos, which I'm sure you guys have seen, the skateboard guy has not even just a regular skateboard. It's like a longboard. It's a much, much larger skateboard. Hits Kyle with it at least once, kind of grazes him, tries to swing and hit him again, at which point he found himself unable to swing. That skateboard somehow ended back up with Hubert's old girlfriend, and the defense was unable to retrieve it as evidence. And during the opening statement, the defense said that they would have liked to show the jury the real skateboard, showed them how big it was, show them how much weight there was to it, and to reenact swinging it so you could see what exactly something this big, you're talking about like nearly a 2x4, swinging it at somebody's neck as hard as you can. What do you think's going to happen to their head when you hit their neck with that? And the defense in their opening statement very colorfully explained what they had wanted to show and provide, but they explained, well, somehow the defense was unable to procure this skateboard from Hubert's girlfriend as evidence, to which I paused. I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean you can't get the skateboard back as evidence? As you might remember from some of the videos, Hubert was shot, fell dead in the street, and his skateboard lay next to him. Well, how did the skateboard get back to his girlfriend? Wouldn't when the cops went to retrieve his body, wouldn't they have collected that stuff as evidence? Wouldn't the skateboard have gone in as evidence? Wouldn't there have been blood and whatnot on it? So somehow, maybe this needs to be investigated a little bit more. Maybe we'll have some more revelations about this later. But somehow, this skateboard, imagine if Kyle's gun, imagine if his rifle, just somehow his girlfriend got it and then refused to provide it to the state as evidence. Kyle had a rifle, Anthony had a skateboard. Maybe don't bring a skateboard to a rifle fight, but you're talking about the weapon again, the state is trying to pretend that these people were all unarmed, but Anthony was definitely not unarmed. He had a skateboard that he was swinging as a blunt instrument, and Kyle just had a more effective projectile instrument. But like, for some reason, the person who the state's alleging was unarmed, the defense, who we've got video evidence of him being armed, the defense is unable to procure the instrument with which he armed himself. That's wild. I didn't realize that just random girls are allowed to withhold evidence in a major murder trial. Like, oh, I don't feel like giving you this. Okay. I didn't realize that just withholding evidence was an option. So I guess, I mean, I don't want to propose anything illegal here, but from this, I would imagine that if you tried to kill somebody, I suppose that you could just give the murder instrument to your girlfriend, and then, when the cops ask her for it, she could just say no. I guess. I don't know. That was weird, and they didn't really explain that. I hope we find some more information out about that, but that was weird. All right, so it sounds like from both opening statements that Kyle Rittenhouse will take the stand and will testify, which will be interesting because that means that he will be cross-examined by the state prosecutor. So that'll be, I'm sure, very interesting to hear from his perspective. That'll be some of the, we've heard through various sources things that he said throughout the last year about what happened in his state of mind, but obviously for necessary reasons been very quiet, and we haven't really heard anything from him. Really, the last spoken statement Kyle's been able to give to the outside world was those interviews that he had in the hours leading up to the shooting, where he was talking about what he was doing with defending. There's some video of him cleaning up graffiti earlier in the day, and then there's some video of him going out and helping out somebody with who needed EMT help. And so this will be interesting to hear him take the stand, because we haven't heard from him. And so this will be interesting to be able to hear from him, and to be able to tell the world and the jury what actually happened that night through his eyes. I had a thought during while hearing some of the trial here, was the state. I think it's absolutely wild that the state, the state being kind of I'm talking about kind of like the theory of the state, right? The abstract entity of the state. So I mean, like the city, the county, the actual United States state, the government, just the government. It's incredible that the government can just abandon you to lawlessness the way they did in Kenosha the night of Kyle's shootings. And they did this all over the country during the riots, where they just abandoned whole cities, millions of people, to just lawlessness for the night. And they will abandon citizens like Kyle to lawless environments for a night, and then the next morning judge their actions by law again. Kyle should be judged by the laws that were in effect on the night that he shot, not the laws that were in effect the morning after. There were no laws in effect the night that he had to get into his self-defense shooting. Yet the state, there was no laws in effect that night. The state could have sent in the National Guard or state police or just regular police. They could have sent people in to reestablish lawfulness, but instead they allowed the city to burn. The state could have enforced rule of law onto the looters that night, but instead they waited until morning to enforce the rule of law onto the people defending themselves from the looters. The state cannot just abandon citizens to lawlessness one night and the next morning enforce laws onto the citizens based on their actions during the lawless period of time. No, Kyle should be judged by the laws that were in effect the night that he had to self-defense shoot. And that would be none laws. There were none laws at all available that night. Everything was just absolute anarchy, and Kyle should be judged by anarchy. If the state wants to enforce laws on people, they need to enforce them on all people. It can't just be, we're going to abandon Kyle to the purge, we're going to abandon all of the business owners of Kenosha to the purge, and the next morning, we're going to judge them based off the standards the morning after the purge. No. if the state is gonna make the decision to allow a city to fall into anarchy, then anything that happens in the city, whether it's looters or self-defense, if something's permitted, everything's permitted. If we're gonna have anarchy for somebody, we're gonna have anarchy for everybody. It's got to be universal anarchy or nothing. It's got to be lawfulness for everybody or anarchy for everybody. It can't be anarchy for BLM, anarchy for Antifa, and lawfulness for everybody else who's just getting killed or their businesses burned down or their skulls bashed in. No, Kyle should be. This is me recognizing more and more problems with our legal system here. You have a state who, we did this all over hundreds of cities last summer, just abandon the citizens to lawlessness, and the next morning judged the people who defended themselves by the laws that weren't in effect that night. Saw the same thing with the McClowskys. Lots and lots of people who this happened to all over the place last summer, and it's completely ridiculous. Let's see here. Moving on for the defense here. So the defense continued their opening statement. They showed, like I said, they showed a lot of pictures, a lot of videos. Some of it was publicly available video, and a lot of what they did was the same kind of reconstructions that we've seen, same kind of reconstruction we just saw on Jack Posobiec's Twitter, of just all of the videos time synchronized and shown at the same time, so you could see the exact same event from multiple angles and get this like 3D reconstruction with as much video information as possible. Again, it's wild that almost all self-defense shootings are just he said, she said, and really just going off of people's words. Kyle's got 4 or 5 angles at any given time over the course of a 5-minute incident composited together. You can see every event from at least 2 angles, if not 3 or 4 sometimes. That's crazy. We've never had a self-defense case like this well documented. And I really think the videos will sell themselves. I think the videos sold themselves that night when we saw it and the weeks after. I think the way that you get the videos to not sell themselves is by deceptively editing them, as the mainstream media attempted to do, to the extent that they showed them at all. But if you just play out the whole clip, which I'm sure the defense will do, they speak for themselves. Let's see here. Let's see here. Gage, who is the guy who was disarmed, literally, Gage, the disarmed guy, will apparently testify. That's what the defense said, which is, I found very interesting. I didn't know that they allowed one-armed men to testify in court, but either way, the disarmed man will testify that he was only trying to stop Anthony, the skateboard guy. So what the defense has been told is that Gage is going to get up on the stand and lie that he was only trying to stop Anthony Hubert, the skateboard guy, from bashing Kyle's skull in. And that's the only reason why he was anywhere near Kyle. The part of the videos that the defense really highlighted were all of the times that the shoulder harness for Kyle's rifle was pulled taut. You can see multiple times that the harness Kyle has securing his rifle to his body, that was pulled taut because somebody was pulling it out of his hands and they were unable to because it was stuck to his body. That was actually what Anthony Hubert was doing when he got part of the rifle, probably not the part that he thought he was going to get. He got a little bit of it, and you could see before that happened, before he got probably about 5 grains of it, or 115 grains worth of the rifle at least, you could see that the rifle strap was pulled taut and that Anthony was clearly pulling it. And so Gage came up afterwards with his Glock pointed at Kyle, chasing him down, which again, am I doing a full high resolution breakdown of the videos. No, you guys can go out and find those. Again, this is more about doing the highlights of the trial rather than breaking down the details of the case or of the event itself. I'm sure we'll go back through and do a recap of that at some point during this series, what I hope will be a series of videos covering the case. But basically, the idea that Gage was not trying to injure Kyle and that Gage was only in that situation trying to hold back Anthony Hubert is, well, the video doesn't exactly show that. We'll just say that. Kyle, it was known that Kyle tried to turn himself in Kenosha, but there was just too much commotion and the police didn't know what he was doing, so they turned him away. And so Kyle ended up going back to his hometown, which I can't remember what the name of that is. But the defense showed video, and they're going to show more video of Kyle and his mom turning himself in at his local police station in the next town over. The timestamp on when Kyle turned himself in was about 120 minutes. He turned himself at about 1:20. His last shot was about 11:50. So he turned himself in about 90 minutes or so after the self-defense incident took place. The defense attorney ended his opening statement with a pretty unequivocal sentence. He just said Anthony and Gage were animals. Basically said that Rosenbaum attacked Kyle. Kyle self-defense, shot him in self-defense, and then Kyle was chased by Anthony and Gage, and they were rabid animals chasing him. And I completely agree. After the defense made their opening statement and sat back down, the judge, very, very important, very critical question to the jury, probably the most pivotal moment in the case. My breath was held. The judge asked the jury to take a vote as to whether or not they thought that it was too warm or too cold in the room and that they would adjust the thermostat accordingly. I believe the vote was that it was a little bit too cold. And after that, today, there was some examination on the stand that took place. I was unable to watch any of that because I was preparing the script, and then I sat down and started streaming. So I actually thought that it was a good spot to pause after the opening statement. So hopefully tomorrow or the next day, I can bring to you the continuation of this with the how did the first people up on stand do? What did they talk about? Were the highlights similar to what I did tonight? We can start going through that. I'm going to probably try to do this every night. We'll see how that goes. Best laid plans and all that, just because it's a lot of content to go through. And if I let this stack up for an extra day, you'll be looking at like a 4-hour stream. So hopefully tomorrow it can be a little bit quicker. We'll see. I have my doubts, but I'm going to do my best. Let's see here. So looks like we still got some people watching. You poor bastards. Alrighty. I'm going to play a little bit of the exchange where the defense and the prosecutors are disagreeing with the judge about whether or not the jury should be told that Rosenbaum was in a mental hospital. I'm just going to let this play us out. I'll be done speaking. I'm not going to comment on this. It's just kind of a tail spot. Again, as you can see from this video here, this is part of a 6.5 hour clip. That was just today's. Yesterday's jury selection was 7.5 hours. I watched all the 7.5 hours. I watched about 5 hours worth of this one. It's a lot of content to grind through. So I'm going to play you the probably the most fun 5 minutes from today. And I'll let that play us out. Thank you guys so much for listening to me rant on this today. I hope you guys are liking this update. Again, this is something that's very important to us and the channel. Direwolf agrees. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this update, and it was helpful to kind of give you the highlights, a little bit deeper dive than what you might be getting on other shows, and not quite as deep as just watching it all yourself. Hopefully we're in that nice middle ground. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you find us tomorrow. Hopefully I find time to do this tomorrow, and I'll let this clip play us out, and I'll see you guys later.
I don't think I'll be any longer than him, Your Honor.
Bless you.
All right. Anything else?
Yes, Your Honor. One of the motions in limine I filed, which was not objected to by the defense, is that there be no reference to any pending or prior criminal cases or convictions with regard to Joseph Rosenbaum. The parties are aware, the jury is not, that there was at the time of his death a pending criminal case between Joseph Rosenbaum and his girlfriend, Carrie Ann Swart, and there was a bond condition that prohibited Mr. Rosenbaum from having contact with her. The purpose of my motion in limine, which, as I said earlier, was not objected to by the defense, was we're not going to talk about that. Now, I made a reference in my opening statement to the fact that Mr. Rosenbaum saw Ms. Swart that night and was basically was not allowed to stay with her, was not able to stay with her that night, so he left her residence. And I purposely worded it that way, Your Honor, because there are many reasons why someone may not be able to stay at someone's residence. It could be because of a bond condition. It could be for a myriad of other reasons. It's my understanding from an off-the-record discussion with counsel that he intends to go into this. He believes I've opened the door to it. I wanted a pretrial ruling from the court on this issue. We got one. And I'm now raising it because if it's going to be mentioned in the opening statement, I think this is the time to address this issue rather than in the middle of an opening statement. So I'm bringing it back up again. I do not believe that my statement opened the door to it. And frankly, my statement is not evidence, so I don't know that it can really open the door anyway. But by and large, I was very careful in the way I worded that, and I don't think it opened the door. I don't think, regardless, this is a relevant issue for this trial. Mr. Rosenbaum's conduct with regard to Ms. Swart has nothing to do with what was going on the street that night. So it is completely irrelevant, and I would ask that the court reaffirm its prior ruling on my motion in limine.
Your Honor, he can't have it both ways. He can't go and say he was at the house and he couldn't stay there and not. Why can't we tell the jury why? Because there was a no contact order. It's not appropriate. He thinks he didn't open the door, but he danced through the door. And he also talked about the hospital, got out of the hospital. He was in a mental hospital. And he's going to put her on the witness stand and we're not going to get to ask that? I mean, that's insane.
I was very careful about the word hospital, Your Honor. I believe it was actually St. Luke's in Racine, which is a medical facility. It is not a mental institution. This wasn't Mendota or Winnebago or something along those lines. And frankly, I'm not even 100% certain why he chose to check himself in. But again, whether or not Mr. Rosenbaum needed a new kidney or needed medications for mental illness or was going in to have his blood pressure checked has nothing to do with the events of this night. And frankly, it's just a backdoor way of attacking his character and suggesting to this jury that somehow because there's going to be an allegation from the defense that he had some sort of mental illness that had something to do with his behavior that night. I'd love to hear an expert on that, I guess, if they want to try and present that, and we can go down that line and we can talk about whether mental illness contributed to his behavior. What was his diagnosis? What medications were he on? We could open that door and go all the way through it, but that's a mini trial on an irrelevant issue, and if it's going to come in, there's a way to get it in through an other acts motion, which was never filed by the defense, and I certainly have not opened the door when I talk about the word hospital. This could be COVID treatment. It could be a kidney transfer. It could be anything. It does not open the door. And again, I was very careful in the way I worded that, Your Honor. You know, if I start talking about his medications or I start talking about, seeing a psychiatrist or something like that, that's different. Hospital is a very nebulous term that could mean a myriad of things.
Help me out here. I thought when I read the pretrial motions, and I know there were a series of them on which there was agreement, so I probably may not have the best recall of those because I didn't have to put too much thought into it. But I thought that the references or the statements which were attributed to Mr. Rosenbaum were, "I just got out of jail today." You're telling me that there was also discussion about hospital? No? Or
there's no video or statements or audio of Mr. Rosenbaum talking about the hospital. The only relevance it has, Your Honor.
Well, wait a minute. So
sure.
Is there testimonial? Are we going to hear testimony that he made statements that he had just gotten out of jail that day?
There's going to be statements to that effect.
Okay.
My
But in
underst-
fact, your statement on your opening statement was, and I will tell you this, I'm going to ask you to try to reconstruct it for me, or if necessary, I'll have the reporter read it. But I don't recall the exact statement. I do know that I thought at the time, I'm surprised he's going into this because it may trigger a response. So what exactly did you tell the jury?
What I said, Your Honor, is that that Mr. Rosenbaum had gotten out of the hospital that day
Right.
and was carrying around a plastic bag,
Right.
which is the kind of bag that hospitals give you to carry around your personal belongings. The only relevance that it has to this case
Well, I
is
don't know.
that's the
I just
bag.
wanted to get
Sure.
the statement.
Yeah, and I
Now,
was doing that because
okay.
the bag comes in, and
Okay.
that's the only
I understand.
relevance.
Okay, now, and you also made a statement about his being with the person by whom he was allegedly bound not to have contact.
That's true.
And do we know the exact scope of that order?
I believe it was a straight, typical, no
Don't tell me
contract.
typical, no.
We can look it up, Your Honor.
Well, what did you say about it? What did you say about it?
What I said is that he had seen her after he got out of the hospital,
Right.
that he couldn't stay with her, and so then he left and essentially came downtown. And Ms. Swart will testify,
Why
and
did
she
you
will
say
talk.
that he couldn't stay with her?
I'm sorry?
Why did you say that he couldn't stay with her?
I said that because it explains why he left and came downtown. He's got a hospital bag, Your Honor. It's a little unusual, I think, for someone to be released from a hospital, have a bag of their personal belongings, go to their girlfriend's place, and then continue to walk around with it. That's a little unusual. We know what was really going on.
And by the way, how do we know that he had been there and had left? Is she going to testify?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so she's going to talk about seeing him, she's going to talk about that bag, and she's going to say she saw what was in that bag. And this comes into play, Your Honor, because this is the bag that was thrown at the defendant. There's been some allegations out there that this is a Molotov cocktail, or it's got chemicals in it, or it's got something that could cause the defendant harm. It had toothpaste,
Okay.
mouthwash, a water bottle in it. That's the narrow relevance of this bag.
Well,
That's why the
I'm not
hospital.
concerned. The relevance is not something I want to talk about now. I want to talk about what you said and
Sure.
why he thinks it is worthy of response.
He's misrepresenting the facts of the case to the jury by saying hospital when it was a mental hospital. Mr. Binger knows full well
Why isn't that a hospital?
he had gotten out for a suicide attempt.
So,
And
It's a hospital.
And let the jury know what type of hospital it was. Why he was acting the way he was. He was not acting appropriately. That's part of the defense. And,
Boy,
then he goes and says, can't stay there. Why can't he stay there? Because there's a court order that says he can't. He wasn't supposed to go there in the first part.
And if he was on trial for violating his bond, then we'd have that trial. But he hasn't been tried or convicted of that because he's deceased. But, Your Honor, and by the way, we have the bond condition here. It's no contact, including the residence, electronic or third party, with Carrie Ann Swart and the Park Ridge Inn, which she stays there, and they had been staying there together until that criminal case started. So, if we want to charge Mr. Rosenbaum with violating his bond, what good would it do? He's deceased. But yes, that is true. But again, it doesn't make him a criminal on this evening. It doesn't make his behavior
Okay.
help explain any of that stuff.
I don't think, as far as your opening statement, you need to respond to his statement about the hospital. I'll have to separately decide
Understood.
at a later point as to whether he had been hospitalized and for what. I don't know if that's admissible or not. I suspect that it is not, but I'll keep an open mind. As far as his not being there or not supposed to be there, again, I'm not sure that I want to hear about that in your opening statement. Again, I'll hear you later as to why you think that would be relevant.
Just because he's talking about my client traveling here from out of bounds,
Right.
and he's trying to say, oh, he had a good excuse for not being at home. He couldn't stay there that night. Well, the jury should know why he couldn't stay there.
Well, I don't know. If he can't stay there, he can't stay there. She could have kicked him out because she didn't like his having a hospital bag. I don't know. I'm not sure it's necessarily relevant. He was where he like the defendant was not supposed to be, allegedly, and we'll let it play out, but don't talk about those two things in your opening statement. Anything else?
No.
Okay.